All right, let's talk about a huge myth in the world of work, one that has shaped how we think for decades. What it really means for a project to be successful. We're always told it's about on time, on budget, and on scope. But what if that's just not the whole story? What we're going to dig into today might just change the way you think about your work, maybe even starting tomorrow.
You know the drill, right? Your boss, your client, everyone asks the same three questions. Was it on time? Did it stay on budget? And did we get what we asked for? For years, this has been the yardstick for success. But is it the right one? Is that really what it's all about?
To really get why this is such a myth, we've got to go back to the rule that started it all. It's a concept that's pretty much dominated project management forever, the iron triangle.
So, what is this thing? Well, the iron triangle is a really simple, rigid model. It basically says a project is a success if and only if it checks these three boxes. You hit your deadline, you don't go over budget, and you deliver the exact thing you promised. It's simple, it's clean, and for a long, long time, it was the law. And look, this isn't some newfangled idea. Researchers like Atkinson were writing about this way back in 1999. For the longest time, the iron triangle was the only game in town, and it was all about one thing. Really, efficiency. But what if efficiency isn't the whole story? And this is where the story gets really, really interesting. Let's dive into the huge difference between just being efficient and being genuinely successful. Just think about it for a second. You probably have this gut feeling, this intuition that the iron triangle doesn't capture everything. You've seen it yourself, right? Projects that totally break all the rules, they're late, they blow the budget, but somehow they end up as these massive game-changing wins. I mean, a perfect example, the movie Titanic. Before it came out, oh man, it was the poster child for a project gone wrong. It was notoriously late and wildly over budget. The press was calling it a guaranteed flop. By every single measure of that iron triangle, it was a total disaster. And then, well, you know what happened. It went on to be one of the most successful movies of all time. And that just perfectly lays out the two big ideas we're talking about here. On one hand, you've got project efficiency. That's the iron triangle stuff. But on the other, you have project success, which is the big picture. Does it actually satisfy the customer? Does it achieve the real business goals? The study we're about to look at finally puts some hard numbers on the relationship between these two. Okay, so how do we know this isn't just a feeling, or a one-off fluke like Titanic? Well, that's where the science comes in. A group of researchers decided to put this whole theory to the test with a huge study. And when I say huge, I mean it. They didn't just look at a few projects. They analyzed data from 1,386 of them. This wasn't about stories anymore. This was about getting hard data on a massive scale. And this wasn't some flimsy online poll. This was serious research published by Elsevier in a peer-reviewed academic journal. Their goal was to finally, definitively answer the question, how much do time, cost, and scope actually matter when it comes to overall success? So how'd they do it? Well, their method was actually pretty clever and straightforward. They went out and surveyed over 800 experienced project professionals. They asked each person to rate two different projects they'd worked on. One they felt was successful, and one not so much. For each project, they had to answer questions about efficiency, the classic iron triangle stuff. But they also had to rate the project based on true success, which they measured by how happy everyone was: the client, the sponsor, the team, and most importantly, the people who actually had to use the thing. All right, so this is it, the moment of truth. After all those surveys, all that data from nearly 1,400 projects, what did they actually find? It really all boils down to this one question. What's the actual mathematical link between the two? If you absolutely nail the iron triangle, does that guarantee a successful project? Let's see what the numbers have to say. So the first number they crunched was this, 0.60. That's the statistical correlation between efficiency and how happy people were. Now, in stat speak, that's a pretty decent positive correlation. It means, yeah, being on time and on budget is connected to people being happy. But a perfect connection would be a 1.0, and we are a long way from 1.0. So that 0.6 tells us they're linked, for sure, but it also screams that they are not the same thing. It proves that there are other factors in the mix. But the real question, the million-dollar question, is how much of a project's success can you actually chalk up to the iron triangle? The next number, now this is the bombshell.
And here we go, 36%. Let that sink in for a second. The researchers ran the analysis and found that hitting your time, budget, and scope goals only explains 36% of whether people think the project was a success. Honestly, if you remember one number from this whole explainer, make it this one. Just look at this. This chart is basically the new reality of project success. That iron triangle, the thing we've obsessed over for like ever, it's just over a third of the pie. The other 2/3, that huge 64% chunk, that's made up of something else entirely. Here's a really simple way to wrap your head around it. Let's say project success is a cake. Project efficiency, being on time, on budget, that's the sugar. And yeah, it's super important, it's vital, but it only accounts for about 36% of the final taste. If you forget the flour, the eggs, and the icing, the other 64%, you don't have a cake. You've just got a bowl of sugar. So, now what? Knowing this, how should we actually change the way we do things? What can we take away from this research for our very next project? Okay, now the big warning here is, don't just toss the iron triangle in the trash. As other researchers have pointed out, things like your schedule and budget are not adequate measures on their own, but they are still really important pieces of the puzzle. Remember the cake, right? You still need the sugar. So what's hiding in that other 64%? Well, the study hints it's all about the bigger, more meaningful questions. Does the thing you build actually work well? Did it move the needle for the business in the long run? How did it change things for the customer? Did you innovate or create something new? And hey, did the team learn and get better along the way? That's the stuff that really defines a win. And that right there is the big takeaway. The message from all this data is crystal clear. Of course, you should pay attention to your budget. Absolutely, try to hit your deadlines. But please don't let those be the only things you measure. To get to true success, you have to look beyond just efficiency and focus on the real impact. So I'm going to leave you with a question to chew on. The next time you're starting a project, or even just looking at the one you're on right now, what are you really going to measure? Will you just be counting the sugar, or are you going to be looking at the whole cake? Thanks for tuning in.